Hello again.
And again.
Happy holidays, everybody. Today, we are reviewing Gremlins.
Gremlins, directed by Joe Dante. They'll be expecting you.
A Christmas story.
Yeah, in a way.
A modern Christmas story.
From over 30 years ago. It's made by Joe Dante, a man who loves paying tribute to old school monster flicks.
They're like huge sea pods. This must be the way that putty in my closet was formed.
Before this, Joe Dante had best been known for making Piranha for Roger Corman and the cult werewolf film The Howling. And it was written by Chris Columbus, who 1 year after this would write another Spielberg-produced film, The Goonies. And then Columbus became best known for directing two very iconic Christmas films, Home Alone and Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Where to begin with Gremlins? It started out as a script by Chris Columbus, and the script was noticed by Steven Spielberg, who really liked it, and next to directing like 100 movies himself, he wanted to produce many, and he thought Joe Dante would be perfect after The Howling, which was a horror film with some comedic elements to it. And that's kind of what Gremlins is. It's a horror comedy and does a reasonably good job of balancing the two genres out, I'd say.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of comedic stuff going on with it.
Yeah.
And it takes the sting out of the horror.
I don't think we can drink this.
What's wrong with this?
But the horror is kind of imaginative, so that's the fun part. Who was ever on the creature crew, as they're shown in the credits, I think they must have had a lot of fun doing that stuff, getting the effects that they did.
The Gremlins were created by Chris Wallace, and he did a pretty fantastic job, I'd say. Brief shout out to Jerry Goldsmith, composer of the score. Also did films like Poltergeist, The Omen, and Alien. Guy who knows how to do horror movies.
Yes.
And to start with the story of this film, the movie opens in Chinatown, and while in this little shop trying to sell his own little gadgets, the guy's kind of an amateur inventor.
You take your toothbrush out, and you push this button.
He comes across a little pet in the shop.
What is it?
Mouthwash.
What's he doing?
Singing.
This inventor named Rand Peltzer. He's just immediately taken by it, and when you see what it looks like later, you can see why, and he wants to buy it, and the owner says,
I'm sorry. Mogwai not for sale. With Mogwai comes much responsibility. I cannot sell him at any price.
But the grandson of the owner, saying they need the money, sneaks it off to Rand and sells it to him under the table. Upon selling it to him, he gives the three very important, although as the film goes on we see there's a couple of holes in these three important rules. Rule number 1.
Keep him out of the light. He hates bright light, especially sunlight. It'll kill him.
Rule number 2.
Keep him away from water. Don't get him wet.
And rule number 3.
The rule you can never forget. No matter how much he cries, no matter how much he begs, never feed him after midnight.
And chaos ensues upon the little town of Kingston Falls, USA. Product placement.
I personally think that the do not feed after midnight rule is badly constructed.
Yeah, they could have been a little more specific, and there have been countless jokes and discussions made about these rules, such as every hour of the day is technically after midnight.
Yeah.
So, are you saying never feed it, or just wait till, like, say, a certain time of the day, like daylight or noon? What?
They could have been clearer. They could have said, only feed it between noon and midnight. And that's the rule, but it has no end. So you get up and have breakfast, give them breakfast, that's after midnight. Nonetheless,
Even the sequel poked fun at this little plot hole.
What if they're eating in an airplane and they cross a time zone? I mean, it's always midnight somewhere.
The story of the film has Rand take the Mogwai back home and gives it as an early Christmas present to his son, Billy Peltzer, played by Zach Galligan in his very first role. I looked and this guy had never been in a movie before. And I wouldn't say he comes off that great, but for a first-time role, he did a pretty good job.
yeah. And he was the central character of the movie.
Are you kidding? Yeah, it's really neat.
He's very likable, very, I guess innocent is a good word.
Yeah, hardworking, upbeat, nice, decent sort.
You signed this petition.
Hey, sure. What's it for?
We're trying to have Dory's pub declared a landmark. Mrs. Deagle's trying to take his lease away.
It's too much.
Within just a couple of hours, he's already making mistakes. And then the next day, a younger friend, played by Corey Feldman, teaming up with Corey Haim, and he shows him the Mogwai, who the family has nicknamed Gizmo. And many have commented that Gizmo is unbelievably cute.
Mogwai. I don't know, some Chinese word. I just call him Gizmo. He seems to like it.
Yeah, I can see they are right. He is adorable.
Yeah, they did a good job.
You want some chicken? No?
Voiced by Howie Mandel, of all people.
Really?
Yeah.
Mr. Mogwai, okay.
Upon meeting Gizmo, Corey tries to hold him and accidentally knocks a glass of like paintbrushes over that have water in it, getting him wet, and apparently water is what makes Mogwai give birth of sorts.
Yeah, it got splattered. And after the Mogwai grunting and calling out in pain and everything like that, the lumps kind of pop off. Get really very big, very quick, right in front of your eyes. And you have more.
Right away, we see these new Mogwai are not really like Gizmo. They seem a bit more sneaky and a little bit hostile.
Hey, look, that one's got a cute little stripe on its head.
And they're led by, what do they call him?
Stripe, because he has a little stripe mohawk.
Yeah, Stripe is a badass.
Stripe is voiced by Frank Welker, best known as the voice of Fred on the original Scooby-Doo and later Scooby-Doo himself. Both he and Howie Mandel, I think, yeah, they did a good job playing the main Mogwai and Gremlin of the film.
Creature 1, Creature 2.
Mm-hmm. And I read that apparently some of the Gremlin voices were done by Michael Winslow. The new Mogwai seem to work as a group. And a couple of weird stuff starts happening, such as the family dog suddenly appearing outside, hung by Christmas lights. When the dad goes away on a science invention convention, Billy takes one of the Mogwai to his old science teacher, Mr. Hansen, played by Glenn Turman.
Notice how the lights are on?
He experiments on one.
Boy, doesn't he look sinister.
No, it's not gonna hurt.
Oh, yes it is.
Big guy like you, come on.
And all over the course of a night, the Mogwai in Billy's possession and the one with Mr. Hansen all manage to eat after midnight.
It's not 12 o'clock yet. You guys are really hungry.
And then, next day we get, I'd say, one of the best horror moments of the film.
Mom, could you come up here, please?
Hello.
Then I want you to bring the vacuum thing upstairs for me.
Like, what is this?
When Billy looks at the clock and then realizes,
Did you feed them after midnight?
Well, I gave them some chicken, but I made sure that it...
that was chilling, like,
Yes, they're self-aware. The Mogwai are smarter than Billy.
I think it's interesting that Gizmo is the only good Mogwai.
Yeah, he doesn't want he doesn't want any part of it. He's afraid of them.
You wonder, are all Mogwai born bad, or is Gizmo just special? And then, later in the day, apparently after a 12-hour period, these cocoons open. Another good horror moment. This is when the fun really begins. Because up until this point, the film's done a pretty good job of making it very calm and unsuspecting.
Nice town, nice people. Isn't this kind of a funny thing? Ha 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 ha. Yes.
The science teacher, who, when you come down to it, is a really bad science teacher. I mean, in terms of handling the Mogwai, cleaning up after himself in his own lab, and after taking a not very subtle blood sample.
Yeah, for the little thing that it wasn't a huge sample, but you know, compared to the size, I mean, he sucked a little more than just a little blood out of that critter.
That's a Snickers.
Hey, you're not still angry about that little blood test, are you?
Yeah.
Come on out, take a bite, let me see you.
I mean, I know that Mogwai is evil, but you got a feeling, this dude might have had it coming.
Yeah.
You try some of this now. I know you got to be hungry. Hey, now, don't you feel better, huh?
The Mogwai left a gesture when he did it in.
Yeah. And originally, his death was a lot more gruesome in the script.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, Billy was going to find the teacher with dozens of needles stuck in his face.
Ah.
And then they changed it to what they ended up going with, like, with one needle in the bum.
Yeah. Teacher's on the floor, needle sticking out of his bum.
Bummer.
As usual, the black guy dies first.
Yeah, definitely. The physics teacher was marked. Ugh.
And then they do a good job of kind of building up the reveal of what the Gremlins look like. Like, when Billy encounters that one at the school, like when it bursts open the door, we don't really get a clear look at it. It's very quick. It's only when we're at home with his mom, played by Frances Lee McCain, that we finally see them.
Yes, when the gremlins come out of the cocoons, the science teacher said it's like a pupa stage.
Pupil.
Yeah, of an insect, like butterflies.
It's called a metamorphosis. It's a change in form and in appearance.
And they are a bit transformed.
The kitchen scene between the mom and the gremlins is ranked by many fans as their favorite scene in the film. And they call Lynn Peltzer probably the most, even though she only gets the one scene with them, probably the most badass character in the film.
It's great. She plays this accommodating wife and mom, and she's baking
Cookies, gingerbread cookies.
For Christmas and everything else.
And then all of a sudden,
it goes bad. And she's just nasty. She's
not
instead of running out of the house, she's at it. She's in there and
protecting their home.
And she's apprehensive, but she's very calm about going about the business of the day.
You can get out of there.
Fun fact, Gremlins and Indiana Jones, The Temple of Doom are the movies that kind of pressed the MPAA to create the PG-13 rating.
Even so, Mom was down getting it bad when Billy finally came home, and it's a household that happens to have swords hanging off the wall.
Mostly as a decoration.
But not this day.
It's showing a good example of transitioning from horror to comedy. We see the gremlin's head in the fire.
Yikes.
And then we cut to Stripe, now fully gremlinized.
Mom, it's Stripe.
Just,
being ridiculous.
Yes, it is something.
Mom's had a bit of an accident. What are they doing?
Oh, be careful.
Billy tracks Stripe down, following his footprints in the snow, to the local YMCA. And after scratching him down for the count, jumps in the pool and this is probably the most visually impressive sequence in the whole film, seeing the pool just get filled to the brim with gremlin smoke as the transformation occurs in the water.
It's a huge boiling sort of sensations, but it's more than that. It's really a good minute's worth of look at. It's fun to see what's happening.
That had to have been a bitch to get done just right.
Yes.
Shortly after that, the gremlins set forth against the town, and we get a bunch of kind of grisly but fun sequences of them going after the townsfolk. We see them go after an old couple, the Futtermans, played by Dick Miller and Jackie Joseph, who, funny enough, had appeared together 24 years earlier in Roger Corman's 1960 version of The Little Shop of Horrors.
What the hell is that?
My My favorite of those moments, I think, is just when they turn all the green lights on at the traffic stop. As awful as that is, that's just hilarious.
Get out of the way.
Now, before we talk about the big finale, let's just go through the cast briefly. We get Phoebe Cates, post Fast Times at Ridgemont High, as Billy's co-worker and later girlfriend, Kate Barringer. I'd say she did a pretty good job playing.
It was a good. She played the role, and she pulled it off. She was good. She was, not just a dumb girlfriend. She had some stuff going for her.
Yeah.
Personality-wise and smarts-wise.
He starts off a little sweet, then we see there's a bit of a dark past.
Because I always thought everyone was happy during the holidays.
Well, most people are, but some aren't. Well, everybody else is opening up their presents. They're opening up their wrist.
Damn.
Cheery thought.
She has her own little badass moment in the bar with the camera, and we get that pretty emotional monologue from her that to a lot of people they say is like, because Joe Dante believed this scene is what represents the whole movie as being like a bridge between horror and comedy, when she talks about why she hates Christmas.
It was Christmas Eve. I was 9 years old, waiting for Dad to come home from work. A couple hours went by. Dad wasn't home.
What did you think of that scene?
I didn't know where it was going until they got down to why her dad didn't come home.
4 or 5 days went by. Neither one of us could eat or sleep. I went to try to light up the fire, and that's when I noticed the smell.
And then, okay, I got you.
And me and Mom were expecting them to pull out a dead cat or a bird, and instead they pulled out my father.
It was a Christmas outcome comment.
He was dressed in a Santa Claus suit. He'd been climbing down the chimney on Christmas Eve. He slipped and broke his neck. Died instantly. And that's how I found out there was no Santa Claus.
Studio people really did not want that scene in the film for many reasons. Probably one being it's going to tell kids there is no Santa. And Steven Spielberg, even he did not like this, but he felt it's Joe Dante's movie, let him make the decision. And probably the dumbest studio notes moment was when the studio told them, "We think there's too many Gremlins in this movie." To which Spielberg replied, "Okay, we'll just cut them all out and change the title to People."
That's good.
My man.
And a supporting character who doesn't get a ton of scenes, but she leaves an impression, is Mrs. Deagle, who's kind of a old grouchy lady version of Scrooge, played by Polly Holliday. And
I want your dog. Give him to me. I'll take him to the kennel. It'll be quick and painless compared to what I could do to him.
I've seen her in a bunch of stuff. 2 movies from my childhood that I saw her in a lot were The Parent Trap, Lindsay Lohan version, and Mrs. Doubtfire. And she's a pretty good actress. I think she always played old ladies. And they weren't all nasty, but she really nailed just a nasty old bitch in this film.
A slow, painful death. Maybe I'll put him in my spin dryer on high heat.
Nasty old lady, had no respect for anybody else, and just they didn't care what their problems were. She just
Yeah, she cuts in the line at the bank.
Pay your rent or get out of the house, that kind of thing.
Just give us a little more time. The bank and I have the same purpose in life, to make money, not to support a lot of deadbeats.
There was actually going to be a couple more scenes. Like, apparently she was like you said, people not being able to pay rent. She was forcing people out of their homes in the hopes of turning a lot of the town's property into a strip mall.
Fucking bitch.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's this character, Gerald, who's kind of a brown noser working with the bank manager who's working with Mrs. Deagle.
What is that dog doing in here? I'll say this is a bank, not a pet store. Very good, Gerald.
Gerald is played by Judge Reinhold, also previously in Fast Times, and he only has like 2 scenes in this movie. Very brief.
They're up front, and they're kind of they're pretty short actually, and it just kind of setting up the contrast with him in the lead.
Guess who almost applied for unemployment today?
I give up.
You. But Mr. Corbin had second thoughts. I would have fired you in a second.
Well, Merry Christmas to you too.
I love Gremlins a lot, but watching it again, I realize there's a lot of moments, especially with certain characters, where it becomes clear they obviously had a lot more scenes.
Yeah.
And originally there was going to be a few more bits with Judge, like him trying to blackmail Kate into going on a date, and a scene near the end where after the Gremlins start causing pandemonium and they're hiding in the bank, they find the bank manager dead, and they find Judge hiding in the bank vault behind the bars, and they try to help him out, but showing that he's still an asshole, he's apparently like losing his mind. He thinks they're only trying to help him so that he'll promote them once he gets out. And Billy and Kate just close the door and say, "We'll get him later."
Yes, this movie was not a short movie, and I can understand why, there's a lot of things you got to cut out.
It's only about an hour and 43 minutes, not including the credits. And I guess it makes sense they cut all this out because it does actually have a pretty good flow to it.
Yeah.
Feels like it goes by pretty quickly. I'm just saying a few extra scenes for 1 or 2 characters wouldn't have hurt. But we do get some pretty fun payoff with the Mrs. Deagle character.
Christmas carolers. I hate Christmas carolers.
We get one of the best moments with the Gremlins just go.
I warned you, friend.
That's actually their own theme song that they're caroling. And then we see the mean, greedy old Mrs. Deagle get her comeuppance. Seeing her just start off going up the stairs is funny enough. The painting, its eyes going, bye, bitch. And then, look at the painting.
That was Mrs. Deagle.
And then we see these 2 cops who Billy tried to warn earlier, and they were in the middle of getting drunk on the job. Like law enforcement does.
Well, Christmas Eve. It was a Christmas thing.
The sheriff, played by Scott Brady in his final role before he died, and Deputy Brent, played by a very young Jonathan Banks. And I'd be surprised if some people actually don't know who that is these days, because he later went on to play the role of Mike in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Be careful, Frank. You may tear your arm off. You want me to put the cuffs on him?
These cops are pretty useless.
Yeah,
they see trouble, they're like...
Why don't you start the car? Because I'd really like to go back to the station now. Frank, please.
They don't believe anything, and you can't be told anything, and it's they are ineffective, and so things get out of hand.
They don't even help Santa.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, the shame. And then we see them get their own little comeuppance with the flip.
Yes.
And as Billy tries to go through the town. We hear on the radio a local DJ getting attacked.
What's that? Kenny, what's that back there? Some Rocket Ricky fans? Hey, you're not Rocket Ricky fans?
He's voiced by actual DJ slash announcer Don Steele. That image of him at the beginning, while a parody of Indiana Jones, is based on how he actually looks. And then we get my favorite scene in the whole film, the Gremlins just partying in the bar. I love seeing them just going nuts, chugging beer, smoking like 3 cigarettes in a row in one mouth. That whole scene was a blast to watch. I loved every second of it, and we see them also playing like arcade games and playing poker and just somehow getting sunglasses specifically for their size. Kate is at the bar, serving them drinks, just scared, trying to avoid getting hurt. Then we get the movie's specifically written song. The Gremlins imitate the Flash dance. Why do they imitate that specific dance? Mega Madness was written and sung by Michael Sembello, the writer and singer for Maniac. And then Kate figures out that bright light is a good way to stop the Gremlins, so she grabs like a Polaroid.
Alright. A smart girl, huh?
Yep. And then after the big monologue, we see the town pretty deserted.
Snow White and the 7 Dwarves.
The Gremlins, all tired out from attacking the town, watch the movie and then...
They love it.
Hi-ho, hi-ho. Hookers on crack. And then showing that Billy is actually pretty smart, they go down to the boiler room.
Cover your mouth. Don't breathe any gas.
Billy?
Yeah, that's a good fuse.
They make the good distance and the theater just goes up in flames in a pretty kick-ass explosion.
And he takes care of the vast majority of gremlins in that one swoop.
But...
Yum, yum.
In the department store.
Oh, it's ripe.
they go in and it's time for the final showdown.
Try and find some kind of light switch.
Of course. Why not now?
Billy, he doesn't go down easy, but he really gets the hell kicked out of him. Almost gets Texas chainsawed to death.
Yes.
I guess because they felt Gizmo should have a special moment, he kind of becomes the hero at the end. Inspired by dialogue he heard from a Clark Gable movie. Stripe, armed with a minigun. Gizmo shows up, and in a pretty badass moment for such a cute little guy. And while it's pretty quick, seeing Stripe just get melted is one of the most satisfying monster deaths I feel I saw in my childhood.
Yeah, they did a good job at developing what a bad critter this was. Mm-hmm. This was a bad creature. You wanted him dead.
And then the melting effect of it, just his bones melting to goo.
It was good. Very good.
The bones are melting.
And then later that night, presumably on Christmas Day, the family is sitting with Gizmo, just trying to cool down, and then all of a sudden...
I'll bet he'd like some chicken soup.
Mr. Wing, Gizmo's owner, shows up pretty much the fuck out of nowhere.
Honey, this is the gentleman who sold me the Mogwai.
So, an interesting choice of words.
And says, like, just give him back. And even though it's emotional, I guess they pretty much agree it's for the best.
With Mogwai comes much responsibility. But you didn't listen, and you see what happens. You do not understand. You are not ready.
Mr. Wing, before leaving, shows that he's not, even though, yeah, he is right in what he's doing, shows that he has a little compassion when he calls Billy over. Who knew Howie Mandel could do such a cute voice?
Perhaps someday you may be ready. Until then, Mogwai will be waiting.
And then he just leaves, presumably making his way back to New York. And you wanted to talk about this scene.
Well, he shows up, nobody brought him, and you think, well, maybe this is a magical element. He can go where he needs to go.
Or maybe he had a taxi.
Yeah, whatever. But then he's walking down the road. He's still in Billy's town there, carrying Gizmo in a box.
Not wearing the best winter clothes.
And just like, that's it? And these people wished him well, and we're sorry, and, you know, he didn't offer him a ride, you know, what is your problem? The whole town got blown up, or, you know, a good part of it did, and everything else, and this guy's, you know...
Apparently he takes issue with this.
Yeah, it's just a dumb way to end.
I will admit, Gremlins, when you come down to it, does have a lot of plot holes and a couple of dumb moments. But in the end, I don't think it really changes the fact that it is a very enjoyable horror comedy, and it's we think of it as a traditional Christmas flick, but it's a good flick to watch when it's snowy around.
Can we talk about the dad character?
Sure. Rand Peltzer, played by Hoyt Axton, who was a pretty well-known folk singer at the time.
You forgot to brush your teeth. You got yourself a bad case of dragon breath. Bad breath.
He was just a meathead. He wasn't a bad guy.
I would say naive.
Just
a little overambitious.
But in a very unproductive way. And it just, the looks on his face was just like, you know, are you really getting this? You know, I just think that there wasn't any awareness in him. Whereas when the mom did what the mom had to do, it was kind of like, there's a parent.
He seems like he's not even that good of an inventor.
You're late for the big meeting. You reach out. You forgot to shave. What's this? Voila.
But he's pretty lovable.
I don't see him as lovable. I just see him as somebody that,
Well, I liked him.
yeah, you know.
I mean, I wouldn't trust him, but I like him.
Yeah. And to say he maybe wasn't that good of an inventor, he was a terrible inventor. That was part of his, that was part of how they presented him. Nothing ever worked.
What is but no, don't push that.
But except when they needed it to grind the gremlin, then it worked. He gets a point for that.
You know what? What? I'll bet every kid in America would like to have one of these. Think about it. The pelts are bent. This could really be the big one.
Good intentions, but not the brightest.
I didn't mean it.
You do with Mogwai what your society has done with all of nature's gifts.
How do you think K. Luke did as Mr. Wing?
He carried the lines he was given. He did them fine. He was consistent in his acting, and you know, he gave a little bit of mystery to the Chinese immigrant shopkeeper sort of thing. So he did that very well.
Fun fact, apparently Mogwai is Cantonese for devil or demon.
Oh, really?
K. Luke, he was in his mid-80s when he made this movie.
Really?
He was best known before this for playing son number 1 in the 1930s, 40s Charlie Chan movies. And the last two characters I just want to briefly talk about, we briefly mentioned them earlier, were Dick Miller and Jackie Joseph as the Futtermans. They were, like, mostly it's Dick Miller playing a grouchy old man who doesn't like anything foreign as far as machines go.
Goddamn foreign cars, they always freeze up on you. You don't find American machinery doing that. Goddamn foreign cars.
The way they come to call the creatures gremlins is...
You gotta watch out for the foreigners because they plant gremlins in their machinery. That's the same gremlins brought down our planes in the big one. That's right. World War II.
And Jackie Joseph just, she's just bubbly, smiley, but kind of funny, and they're funny together.
Yeah.
La 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 la. Right, Murray? La la la.
Originally, the Futtermans were going to die, but they thought it might have been a little too cruel for those characters.
Yes, I mean, they weren't in the way of anything, and they gave some good texture to the movie.
In fact, Chris Columbus's original screenplay was a lot darker. For example, the Gremlins were originally going to kill the dog, and the mom was going to get her head cut off and thrown down the stairs. And there was going to be a sequence where the Gremlins attack a McDonald's and eat the customers like they're fast food. Make up your own mind if there's some kind of metaphor there. And apparently, Gizmo was going to be the main villain. There was no Stripe. The leader of the Gremlins was going to be Gizmo,
Yeah.
but Steven Spielberg said there had to be a Mogwai that the audience could follow throughout the film. And he also thought Gizmo was too cute that they would never accept him as being evil.
Yeah, and in some ways it added to the development of the Mogwai, because you know the offspring of Gizmo, under bad leadership by Stripe, you know, they started to bring everything down. So.
And apparently the Gizmo puppet had only been designed for the first half of the film, which is why until the finale, where he takes action, he's mostly just in Billy's bag, because they weren't prepared to do much more with him. And also, originally, both Billy and Gizmo were going to open the blinds at the end that kill Stripe, but Spielberg once again thought Gizmo should be the hero at the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good call. That's why you're the executive producer.
Well, normally they don't do much, but with Spielberg, of course he's going to do a lot.
Yeah, he's going to have opinions.
Gremlins got released not around Christmas time. I don't know, I guess they thought releasing a horror movie at Christmas would be bad for business. They released it on the same day as another iconic horror comedy, Ghostbusters.
Really?
Yeah, and Gremlins ended up being the 4th highest grossing film of 1984. Made on a budget of $11 million. It made over $150. I love it a lot. I hadn't seen it in a while before we decided to do this review, and I actually think the sequel is pretty damn good too. So maybe I'll get to that someday. And it blends the horror and comedy genres very well. Everybody in the cast is pretty solid, whether they're huge or small roles, and
yes, it is good comedy horror. No individual scene is really gross out. I mean, they got splatters, they got this and they got that, but it's done in a way that, you know, it doesn't hit you in the stomach or send a sharp electrical shock up your neck or something like that. It's fine, and you're right. It's well carried out. Even some of the silly things about it are more fun than they're anything else.
The scene where the dad is at a science convention, we see Robbie the robot from Forbidden Planet appear. It's all dialogue from that movie, but he's there.
I rarely use it myself, sir. It promotes rust.
In the background, we see The Time Machine from the 1960 adaptation of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. And after cutting to the mom and back, it's gone, and people wonder, like, where did it go?
People are walking through that part of the set looking for you. That's very. It's a fun touch.
Very subtle.
Yes.
Something Joe Dante would do. And he's a fan of the Looney Tunes. They're directing a Looney Tunes movie. So, in one scene, we get Chuck Jones, who did the Tom and Jerry cartoons, as Mr. Jones.
The old bath never looked better. It's great. You're doing fine. Thanks. Hello, Gerald. Give me Mr. Jones.
Thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed our review. Hope it wasn't too ramblish. And hope you have a happy Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, or whatever the fuck you celebrate. And if you don't celebrate, do whatever makes you feel good.
Have a good night.